Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for anyone going through the tween and teen years. I'm Rachel Richards, journalist, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters. Now, what do we do when our kids have worked really hard for something and it didn't go to plan? That's today's question, prompted by an email from a listener whose son had his heart set on going to Cambridge University, but he didn't get in. And for us parents, well, it can be a gut-wrenching jolt, and trying to steady ourselves when our kids are upset can be a challenge in itself. And with this in mind, I contacted Dr Dominique Thompson, a multi-award-winning young people's mental health expert, author, president of the UK Student Health Association, and TEDx speaker on what I learned from 78,000 doctors' consultations with university students. Well, who could we ask that's better on this subject, hey? Welcome, Dominique.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, when something a teenager has pinned their hopes on falls apart, what do you think's actually being lost for them emotionally?
It's a really important thing to think about because disappointment, we know, is a natural part of life. But when you're having your first disappointments, the big ones in life, there's a lot going on for them. So it might be that their first exam failed, or failing their driving test, or first relationship fails. All of those things are big events. So there are probably, for me, I think there's 3 main things going on. And I think there's that, first of all, that realization that life is difficult. There are going to be these disappointments, and that might make them feel quite down. Then there's uncertainty, and uncertainty makes us all feel anxious. We don't like it when we don't know what's going to happen, that feeling of not being in control. And then for me, the third thing is all about the loss of the imagined future, the hopes, the dreams. That seems to sort of maybe fade away for a bit or out of reach. And so there may be a sense of hopelessness or feeling quite flat after that. I guess our role, therefore, is to help them to manage those sorts of disappointments and think about, what strategies can they use and how are they going to get through it?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think about back to the first time these sorts of things happen to me, and they can feel devastating because, we get to this age and we've seen many, many failures and many problems that we've managed to resurface from. But it's such a big thing when they're young. And do you think there's a difference between, for us parents, encouraging resilience and accidentally teaching a teenager to suppress or minimize their feelings?
Yes, I think we have to recognize, of course, that resilience is a process. It doesn't happen instantaneously. And so what we're trying to teach them when we talk about resilience or resourcefulness, which is another nice word to think about it as, is that they're going to have to take time to notice how they're feeling about something, acknowledge those feelings, those emotions. They may be very valid, very normal. They may range from sadness through to anger, and it's not about suppressing any of those, but it is about noticing them and perhaps thinking about, what is socially appropriate, potentially if it's anger specifically. But then it's thinking about how they accept those feelings, accept that that is a normal reaction. And then they think about what are they going to do next. Now that takes time, and that is resilience. And being able to do that on your own later on independently as an adult is what we're trying to practice when they're at home with us.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is really a challenge that you just have to learn, don't you? And I think so many teenagers, because their lives are quite confined when they're young, they tie their self-worth to just these grades or the offers and the comparisons with their peers. So I suppose the big question is, how can we parents help them to separate, how their value as a person and who they are from what they've just achieved and what they can point to?
Yes, it's a really interesting shift, I think, over the last 20, 30 years. Certainly, I spent a lot of time working with young people, seeing them when they're at their most down or things are very difficult when I was their GP at university. And there did seem to be this belief that their achievements mattered more than who they were as a person. I sometimes felt that. And we want to very much be clear with our young people that they are much more than their achievements. They matter much more. They have other traits, of course, which are kindness and thoughtfulness and being a great friend and being loyal and those sorts of things. And we want to make sure they know how valued they are as part of a family or part of their community and so on. But I think it's come from a very interesting shift in our society where we have put an awful lot of emphasis on winning all the time. We always see
Yeah.
this at the moment, this need to be the best, be the winner. And I think we need to move away from that. So at the moment, they're immersed in this culture where they have to win, not just academically, they have to be the best at their sports or, singing, dancing, the performing arts. But I've also noticed this need to win because we're surrounded by it, at things like pottery and painting and making cakes. And I
Yes.
just think it's such a strange message to be constantly pushing at a whole generation. So if we acknowledge that shift, that we're always emphasizing the need to win and be the best, we can take a step back. As parents, we can say, okay, you do not need to be the best at everything.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can do your best, and you can do your best most of the time, but you won't necessarily have great days every day. That's going to vary. And I think it's about changing that phrasing, that framing from needing to be the best, which they feel they have to be. There's this huge pressure and this real fear of failure that is out there, and move it towards just doing your best, the best that you can do on a day-to-day basis.
Oh gosh, it's such an important point. And I think, I mean, I've read Jennifer Brenny Wallace's book, Never Enough, about this. And there are a lot of statistics that prove that kids that come from these kind of really high stakes backgrounds where they need to be the best, they've got to win awards and accolades and, art, you only do it because you want to be the best at it, ends up with the same level of mental health problems and drug abuse and alcohol abuse as kids who come from really, really disadvantaged backgrounds. And so we really want to get away from that, don't we?
Yeah.
And I remember my daughter saying, oh, there's no point in me dancing because I'm not particularly good at it. And it's so frustrating, isn't it? Because the messages are coming from everywhere because she
Yes.
loves dancing. Why not? Why
Yes.
not just dance? You've seen thousands of university students as a GP. So I'm fascinated by what sorts of things you were led to reflect on in your role. What kinds of things would they be coming to you with?
Oh, very much around this need to be perfect, first of all, this
Really?
perfectionism that was being driven. And in fact, the scientists, the psychologists have done the studies and shown that perfectionism is hugely increased now compared with 30 years ago. And it comes out in so many different ways, as we were saying about academic, need to be perfect, be the perfect flatmate, be the perfect friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, and so on. I mean, this huge pressure not to fail, not to let people down. They would come and see me, and I would regularly have consultations where the young person just would say, I don't know what to do. I'm at rock bottom. This is my last resort. I've come to you. And okay, so we'd have that conversation. We'd start talking. And I would say, of course, have you spoken to your family about this? Your parents, your carers, anyone that you would trust at home? Oh, no, I'm not telling them about this. This, what they
No.
saw as a failure. It might be an exam or a relationship. There are lots of things it could be. And so I would obviously, take that carefully and say, well, you're not speaking to them because maybe they're not very supportive, or is it because maybe they don't kind of get mental health and those sorts of challenges, because we all come from different backgrounds. And more often than not, those young people would say, oh, no, they're lovely. They would really support me. They'd be so supportive, but I do not want to let them down. I don't want to worry them. So they
Wow.
have this huge worry about letting people down, not wanting to stress them out. And I think as parents, carers, and so on, we've got this real opportunity to get ahead of that. If we know that that's what they're worrying about, we can talk to them about it and say, you're going to feel pressure. You're going to university, for example, you are going to feel academic pressure. It's normal. And therefore think about, how will you manage that? Where will you go if you need help? And just try to get ahead of it so that they don't feel that they can't tell you about it if things are tricky.
Wow, I love that. And I think my daughter went up to university this year, and I really saw that because the first term was absolutely grueling. The
Mm.
level of work expected from her, in addition to all the other things of trying to make friends and, meeting new people and achieving things in sports and stuff was brutal. And one of the things I had said to her before was, I expect you to do badly, because if you turn up and you're really good, why are you there? David Jager did some research recently, and he said that one of the things that they found really protective with younger kids was if they all taught them about the growth mindset and said that all these kids have the ability to grow. They're not this set person. So I love what you're saying
Yes.
about that.
No, I was going to say they can see it as part of their identity, that they are the person who doesn't succeed. But of course, identity changes. Identity is flexible. And the whole point of the teenage and adolescent years is that you develop your identity. And I very much discuss it with parents, for example, as a jigsaw. And they're trying out the pieces of the jigsaw, but they don't know what the final image is going to look like yet. So whilst they might try a piece that's, blue hair and another piece that's tattoos or a certain type of music taste, some of those will move around and some of them will stick. And the final image is to be decided. So what we don't want them to do is internalize that feeling of failure, that they are a failure. That is part of their identity. They're trying stuff out. And I really, really try to get them to celebrate trying new things and not worrying if it goes wrong. And that actually it going wrong is part of the learning process.
Yes, I've battled the perfectionism with one of my daughters. And what about those kids who really they seek academic validation? They feel that they need it. And if they don't get it, they feel like it's just crushing. Are there things that we can be saying to them?
Yes, I mean, of course, it's an important ongoing conversation. It's, as you know, not sort of one and done. We have to keep having these conversations because if they tend towards that perfectionistic trait, then they're always going to seek to be better and set themselves a standard, and then they'll try and beat that standard. It's exhausting for them. So we have to have ongoing conversations. But I think, there's been some fantastic campaigns, for example, at universities where they've sort of had the slogan, "You are not your thesis." You are not your degree. You are not your A-levels. You are not your GCSEs. And I think this is where we come back to that conversation about they are so much more than that. They are someone's grandchild. They are someone's best friend. They are a fantastic, flatmate. They're thoughtful, they're kind, they help the neighbours out, they volunteer, they do DOE, whatever it is they're doing. I think it's about celebrating that whole image. That's all of who they are. And it isn't just the academic part. That is just a small part of life, as we generally tend to know as we get older. If we can share things like when it's gone wrong for us in a really kind of sort of not over the top way, but just try to say sometimes, well, I know it's not the same, but I do understand because, so there was this time when I didn't get a job I went for, or I failed an interview, or, when they failed their driving test, well, you can say it took me this many goes, or, just letting them know, not making it all about you, but just letting them know that this is a normal thing, that it isn't always going to go according to plan. And in a way, planning ahead for that. So if they're off to uni, then having a conversation, not to say when it goes wrong, but if it doesn't quite go to plan, how are you going to manage that? Who are you going to speak to? Because I did have this slightly funny moment the other day when I saw that a friend of mine had purchased a university level textbook to brush up on their, I don't know if it was geology or something. I mean, this is not an area that they were an expert in. So when I say brush up, I use the term loosely. They were trying to learn because their child, their undergraduate child was at university and struggling with the course. And so their approach was to say, well, I need to know more about this.
Wow.
And I thought, that's not the approach, apart from the fact you're never going to know as much or what you need to know. And I understand that it comes from a great place. It comes from a place of support and wanting to be there for them and have this conversation. I thought, actually, it would be a lot easier for everyone not having to learn geology at the age of whatever we are now, but to signpost them to the academic tutor who is the person they're supposed to go and talk to. And whilst that may sound obvious, and I totally get where someone's coming from when they're trying to do that, I just think we're making our own lives so difficult if we're also trying to kind of do everything they're doing alongside them. So I've sort of gone over a few different areas there, but I think we need to prepare them for if it doesn't go well, so if academic stress is a thing, who will you speak to? If flatmate issues are a thing, who are you going to speak to? If housing is a challenge, because universities have a department for everything. So there will be someone there to deal with any of those issues.
Oh, I love that. I think that's really important. And what you've nodded to is this increase in the amount of parents who feel that they want to remain quite careful with their kids as they go up through to university and beyond. And I know there's a guy called Levi Pei who's talked about this and said, this is really frustrating because if you're at a university, you want the kids to kind of move into their community and create a community, not be stuck talking to their parents about things that are going wrong. Why do you think that's happening?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one. I mean, parenting shifts in every generation, and I've certainly seen that change. For example, when I started as a GP in a university, which is probably 25 plus years ago now, that makes me feel old. But basically, when I started, I would not hear from a parent of a student from one year to the next. By the time I left to sort of set up my business, write my books and so on, which is about 8 years ago, not a week would go by, perhaps sometimes not a day would go by without an email or a phone call or a message from reception saying, can you call so-and-so's parent? And it was sometimes totally understandable, always, as I say, where it's coming from. It comes from a place of caring and love. But it was sometimes things like, and this was a genuine call, so Dr. Thompson, you've got to help him. You've got to stop him. He's gaming all night. And I thought, well, first of all, I'm a GP. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. But also I said, he's 23. I'm not really sure that I can do much. Those are his decisions. And so I get that the parent is worried and they don't want them gaming all night and so on. But we have to prepare them for that independence. I really believe we have to prepare them for that independence because we are definitely seeing a more involved parent generation. And some of that may be helpful and supportive. You're alongside, you're coaching them to do all the right things when they need to. But we have to avoid doing it for them. We can help them to do it, whatever that thing is, get the plumber in for the toilet that doesn't work in your flat. It might be that you have to speak to somebody about, financial challenges. You might have to go and speak to your academic tutor about the work. We can support them to do that, absolutely. But we shouldn't be doing it for them. We shouldn't be the one calling the plumber or phoning the academic department, as tends to happen now. And so it's about preparing them for that independence.
Yes, and not panicking when it goes wrong. Because my daughter, when she first started, she was finding it so overwhelming. She wasn't getting enough sleep. She was trying to manage lots of things she wasn't used to doing. And she's twice in the first term, she put her washing load on and didn't put the laundry soap in because she just forgot. And it's just things like that where you've just, as a parent, you just got to go, it's fine. It's fine. It's going to take time for her to adjust. And, if I step in now, it's all going to be just much harder. But how would you know that there's something genuinely we should be worrying about as a parent?
You're going to know if they are changing how they behave, for example. So you're worried that they're withdrawing, they're not contacting you or anyone as much as they did. If you're worried they're not sort of caring for themselves, they're not eating, sleeping. And if those things are going on in what I use the phrase persistent and pervasive way, that they're stopping them doing the things that they need to be doing for probably, I would say, several weeks, so 3-4 weeks at a time, that's when we need to be more concerned and encourage them to seek help. And again, universities have lots and lots of counselling, psychologists, wellbeing advisors, department wellbeing advisors. So there's lots of help out there. But we've got to expect that they are going to struggle sometimes to make themselves something healthy to eat. And again, just let them do it. If you're going up to visit, great. Help them with the big shop. Do one for them. That's fine.
Yes.
But let's not go over the top with, and I have heard genuinely parents organising long distance food deliveries and all sorts. It just, they're not going to learn if we're doing everything for them.
I've heard about a parent going up every week to clean the room. And I most universities you have in the first year, you actually have a scout who'll go in and do some cleaning. But this parent was still going up and changing the bed linen and do everything.
It's too much, Rachel. I mean, no, we've got enough cleaning and other things to do at home. But I think it's in that same group maybe as the parents who, and again, I always caveat this, I do understand where it comes from. It's always from a good place. But the parents who are tracking their young person to the extent that they're, always watching where they are because they've got a tag or something like that. Once they're 18, even if the young person says, oh, I don't mind, actually set them free. Let them be
Yeah.
independent. I get that people talk about safety and so on. They've got to be able at some point to do this, to go out there
Mm.
and not have where they are at all times. And actually, after, even though they say maybe at the beginning, oh, I don't mind, they will mind. They will start to
Yes.
mind, and then it becomes an awkward conversation. So you be the one, cut them free.
Yes, yes. And don't be calling them up and saying, I see you didn't get home till whatever time you have a
No,
lecture the next morning. Who cares? This is their problem. It's not
it's
your
their
problem.
choice. They're going to have to deal
Yes,
with the
it's their choice.
fallout. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard. And I think what's interesting is you and I mean, I think I'm probably older than you, but we come from a generation of doing things very differently. And I think parents have come through and gone, oh, well, I didn't particularly like that. And they've tried to correct the completely lack of interest in what the kids were doing and perhaps overcorrect. I think some of it, to be fair to parents and myself included, is that if you look at everybody else going and changing their kids' bed linen or whatever they're doing, you can start thinking,
Mm.
oh, maybe I'm not a very loving, kind parent. And I had a conversation with a friend the other day and just said, sometimes being kind is all about creating boundaries and saying, well, I can see that you can do this for yourself. That's a different form of kindness, isn't it? What about the kids who've gone to university? And we've tried to say, look, go and speak to, there are mentors you need to find. We've tried to tell them, and they're saying, I'm just going to drop out. I just don't see this as a worthwhile thing. Are there any thoughts you have about that?
Oh, yes, I've certainly talked to my fair share of young people who are thinking of, leaving prematurely, dropping out, whatever the sort of phrase might be. And obviously, it very much depends on their situation. So, it's hard to generalize too much. But for example, we know that a mental health challenge is the commonest reason for a young person to drop out of university. So in that case, I would be talking to them about all the things they can do in terms of their health and physical, mental health to get them better, and to simply press pause. Universities are very happy to press pause on your studies. You essentially
Yes.
take a planned break, and it might be a term, it might be the rest of that academic year, and you come back. The universities have absolutely no issue with that. If
Mm.
it's a planned, it's supported by, the doctor, the counsellor, whoever else, the academic team, not a problem. I think a lot of students don't realise that's an option. It's sort of all or nothing. They've
Mm.
got to be there and 100% all the time or not. And actually not at all. Everybody knows that you're not always yourself. So, so the first thing is, if it is a mental health issue, it's about stop, pause, get help, get sorted out, come back when you're ready.
I love that.
If it's for other reasons, and I do hear, about imposter phenomenon or feeling like you haven't quite found your friends yet and you feel quite isolated. We see a lot of students feeling lonely, feeling isolated. 44% of students felt they were sometimes or always lonely at university in a
Oh,
study a couple of
no.
years ago. That is often because they haven't yet met their people. So I try, when I do my talks for sixth formers and schools and so on, I try to remind them it takes time to find your
Mm.
people. I mean, I am still in touch with a few people from uni, but not on a day-to-day basis. They are not going to be the people that you're friends with forever. And the same goes for school. So I think we have that, obviously, ability to look back and know that. So we can encourage them and say, look, it's going to take time to make your friends and find your people. But you've got to try. And it's useful for when you move into the workplace to try making friends and meeting
Yes,
people now.
absolutely.
So we know that there are specific reasons why young people drop out of university. But if we look at the reason, there is usually a way to sort that out for most people.
My daughter found the first term really stressful because she found some people she liked, but it wasn't an easy fit necessarily. My advice to her was just, you need to join clubs. You've got to be out searching for people with your taxi light on, because without making the effort yourself, you can't expect this to happen. And I think one of the difficult transitions is when they come from a school and the friends are delivered up in the school environment. Whoever's in the school, that's who you become friends with for a lot of kids. And then they go to university and it's a whole different ball game. And like you said, it's a wonderful skill set to have, to actually
Yeah.
learn how to go and build new
Yes.
contacts.
And there was a survey of 6,000 plus students just literally 2 or 3 weeks ago that found that 59% of students last year said they would like the university to help them to make friends. I mean, I guess we have to think about, the impacts of COVID and why they're finding it hard to make friends, but it's almost, in a sense, reassuring for the other young people to know you're not alone in this. You're not alone in
Yes.
trying to make friends. Everybody wants to make friends. In fact, when you ask young people what they're most excited about going to university, it's actually making new friends. You
Yes.
also ask them, what are you most worried about? It's making new friends.
New friends.
So it's a real, knotty problem. They're all struggling with this to a greater or lesser degree. So we can help them. We can help them by reassuring them this is quite common. You're trying to find your people. It won't work straight away. And if you just don't know what to do, as you said, there are clubs, there are societies. And my favorite one that I used to recommend to students sitting in front of me saying, I've got no friends, I don't know what to do. I say, look, a lovely thing to do is volunteering, because you will meet people who are like-minded and kind. It will be something that you're interested in. So there are so many ways to volunteer. I mean, I don't have to list them at university, everything from helping local school kids to read, through to walking dogs, through to eco, gardening type stuff. So there's so many ways. So meet your kind of people by volunteering. You'll feel good. You'll do something useful. Everybody's doing better.
Oh, I love that. It's funny, as Jennifer Brenny Wallace wrote in her book Mattering, her whole quote is not doing better than others, doing better for others. And this sense of being plugged into a community and knowing that you're giving, even if it's just volunteer. When I was at university, I became part of the student union and volunteered to go and help out at events, which meant I could get into them free.
Brilliant.
So anything.
Win-win.
Yeah, I had no money. I literally had no money. So I just did everything I could to make sure that I got plugged into things without having to spend anything. So there were always ways. And my daughter, I just said to her, just host. Why don't you just, or anytime you meet someone who you vaguely like, get their details, call them over, have a cup of coffee with them and just say, just get a few together. And, you'll find amongst them that there are people who click.
Definitely.
So we talked about people who've gone away, but what about the teens who feel left behind, who are watching everyone else move forward, particularly if it's something that they wanted and then they didn't manage it, and you've got this era of social media that makes things so hard? How would you help them?
Yeah, I understand that they might initially see it as feeling left behind. For me, I would look at reframing that and say, look, you're choosing a different path. And your path is as valid. It is a different one. It's exciting. You don't know where it's going to lead. And that in life, sometimes, and I know it's really hard when you're actually at that junction, but when something goes wrong and you end up going a different way, it can end up being the most amazing experience. So I can give a couple of examples that are very simple that were mine. I got turned down from Cambridge, went to Bristol, never looked back. I mean, absolutely loved it, still live in Bristol. So that was one very sort of simple, straightforward, regular one that lots of people get. I also tell the story when I talk to sixth formers, especially because I was really annoying, because I was that kind of girl who, passed the exams, passed the driving test, went off to uni, didn't get into Cambridge, that was fine. And then ended up passing my, getting my degree, being a doctor, and went for my first jobs that I wanted, got the ones I wanted. So irritating, wasn't I? And then I got to this point, and I went for an interview. I went to this interview and there were 6 of us for 5 jobs. And I was like, this is fine. I wasn't cocky or anything. I just thought this will be fine. And I was the only one walking back to my car that evening without a job. First massive failure. So I go back to my shift that evening, which happens to be an A&E. And, I just was in a bit of a daze, kind of thinking, I've now got this 6-month gap in my career. Like, what am I going to do? I don't know where I'm going to go. And I wandered past a poster that said Rally International. And I thought, well, I've got nothing else to do. So I literally just signed up to do Rally, didn't give it too much thought. I had the most amazing time. And it was probably one of my best ever life experiences. Obviously, my 16-year-old can't hear me, but obviously he's up there too. So you see what I'm saying. One door closes, another door opens. It's a cliche, but it's because it's true. And so if they're feeling left behind, inverted commas, I would absolutely reframe that. New path, different chosen pathway, and do it purposefully. Choose what you're going to do and go off down that route.
Yeah, I think that's such important advice. And the problem is when you've been sort of on a conveyor belt and you have only been looking in one direction and then there's nothing there, and it can feel very much like just dropping off a cliff.
Hmm.
And I think us parents need to think ahead, that sometimes it can feel like dropping
Yeah.
off a cliff if they don't quite get what they want. And also that there are different ways of presenting them with ideas for things that they can do, and being able to look outwards is really important. I think a lot of kids
Yes.
haven't developed that skill.
No, and when they're at that moment, that is not the moment to go, oh, one door closes, another door opens. That's going
Yeah.
to just be really very irritating. The point is that at some point that will become a way that you can frame it. But if they're
Yeah.
in that acute phase of disappointment, then it's all about listening, validating their feelings, agreeing that this is really difficult. I would be quite careful not to allow them to catastrophize and spiral off too
Yeah.
much, of course. You want them to have space to think about the fact that this is disappointing, and you'll say, yeah, it is. And that's okay to feel that. So you validate that. But then you might need to take a bit of time to distract yourself, to kind of ride those waves of emotion, which means just give it a bit of time, come out the other side slowly, distract yourself with other activities, other things. And at some point in the not too distant future, you can start to think about, okay, all right, this is a new path, a new choice. What am I going to do?
Yeah. And I think for the parents, often the most important thing for them to do is actually let the child know that they don't feel like they've been let down, because you said
Mhm.
that earlier, and that's actually so important, isn't it?
Yes. No, I can't agree more. I think, you know, parents really feel their children's emotions. I absolutely understand that, but their emotions are not our emotions. We have
No.
to make sure that they are not shouldering our response as well as their own response. Okay,
Yeah.
we can have our response. We are entitled to feel disappointed, stress, whatever, but we take that somewhere else. We share with our friends, we go with obviously our partner, we can talk to other people about it, but it's not for them to worry about that. They're already acutely aware that they may be, disappointing you. And we need to reassure them they are not. This is just one thing that has happened at this stage in life, and we are there for them. So, I think it's so important not to conflate the emotions, theirs, ours, and so on. Ours are not to go on their much younger shoulders at that point, of course. And I think a lot of parents are aware of that. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we finish up?
Well, I think something that may happen is that a parent may themselves feel that they're failing their young person if they're
Yes.
not able to fix things and make everything better. But I think I just want to say that no parent who cares about their child is failing them. They are just doing their best. And therefore, as long as we're alongside them, not doing it for them. Remember, we are not doing it for them. We are alongside them. We are coaching. We are supportive. And the other thing that I think we have to be is the safe harbor, the place they can come
Mm.
back to when and if it does go wrong. We need to know that they know they can come back anytime. We are there. We're not judging. We're just there to support. And I think that safe harbor concept is so important to me, so that no matter what happens, as I said, I've got a 16-year-old, he's got GCSEs this year, ideas about A levels, all the rest of it. But he knows no matter what happens, and I do mean weird and wonderful things that can also happen to anyone in life, he's got a safe harbor here. And I would want all those young people out there, they should, I'm sure they do, feel that they can go home to their safe harbor.
Yes, beautifully put. That's wonderful. I think Ned Johnson talked about it as, when the kid comes in the door, arrows in their back, and you just go, hey, looks like it had a tough day. And
Yeah,
they know that when they get home, the door closes and it's all good.
exactly.
It's not going to continue when they get inside. So I
No.
love your point about safe harbor. That's a lovely
Yes.
idea. If people would like to get in contact with you, what's
Yes.
the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely fine through either my website, which is buzzconsulting.co.uk, or I also have one with lots of free blogs. All these sorts of
Great.
topics are covered, which is growingagrownup.com. So just have a look there. But my website, my email, dominique.thompson@me.com. Happy for people to contact me.
And if you'd like to contact me, it's teenagersuntangled@gmail.com. I've got a Substack. I've got my own website that is all Teenagers Untangled. And my mantra is, you are doing better than you think, because I think very often we just don't realise how well we're doing. It's tough. It's a tough job,
true.
isn't it?
We're just doing the best we can.
Doing the best we can. That's it from me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.